Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing well, and I warmly welcome all the participants and our speaker, Ms. Rida Tanvir. First of all, I would like to introduce her, and then we will move forward. Ms. Rida Tanvir is currently lecturer at the National University of Modern Languages, and she is a PhD scholar from Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. Also, she is a philanthropist and a motivational speaker as well, and expert on the foreign policy of Iran. And then moving forward, I would like to add that this is our sixth session of online diplomacy course. We have already covered many topics. So today we will be discussing about public diplomacy. So I would like to give the floor to Ms. Rida. Honorable Ms. Rida, the floor is yours. Yes, am I audible?
May I start, Ms. Sabar?
Yes, please. You can continue. The floor is yours.
So would you be sharing the slides or should I do that?
I think I can also share the slides as well. So
if you do it, it will be easier for me.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Can you see the screen?
Let me see.
I'm sharing.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I think Musavar has introduced me. So I'll just be giving you a brief lecture regarding public diplomacy. Well, public diplomacy basically means that, please, the next slide, Musavar. All right, just a second. All right, so public diplomacy, it is basically an instrument that is being used by the states and non-state actors to understand various cultures, attitudes and behavior, building and managing relation, as well as mobilizing actions to advance their interests and values. Public diplomacy is a rather recent kind of a concept. It does not date back to as far as the concept of diplomacy goes. So basically, public diplomacy was formulated in order to mitigate the interests of the state through soft power, basically. So it is democratization of diplomacy with multiple actors playing a role in restricted area, basically. So what happens is that it collaborates with the help of the public and along with government officials, and they basically collectively try to pursue and further the interest of any state in order to bring forward the, you can say, the mutual interest of two states or more through indirect means. For example, I'll just give you an example of Pakistan and India for now. Since Pakistan and India has had a rough kind of a relation, and since 1947, they have been in a state of war on and off. So what happens is that when the states cannot directly communicate or collaborate with each other, they use the public support, and there is a possibility that the government might be behind those public, those you can say those you can say the individuals of the state, in order to pursue the interest of the state, because they would use that public in order to lessen the tension between two states. Then it is basically public diplomacy can be more better. It can be understood in a better way through three different dimensions of it. Number one, political/military, then economic, and then thirdly, societal or cultural. But let's, for the sake of argument, continue the role of public diplomacy. Basically, in public diplomacy, what you do is that you have an open exchange of ideas and information, and you basically try to influence public's attitude on the formation and execution of foreign policies. It is also a process of intercultural communications. You basically try to merge or you try to come up with a middle ground for multiple cultures so that you can create some sort of harmonious ground. Then public diplomacy leads to mutual understanding and peace, because sometimes it so happens that two states might not be able to achieve the peace due to the fact that they both are sovereign and they both are hardcore realists. So in that case, they can use the public in order to pursue their soft, you can say, side, this softer image, which is peace, which is intercultural harmony, etc. Then long-term cultural and educational exchanges is also an example of public diplomacy, where you would sign memorandum of understandings with various universities. It does not necessarily mean that you are only having this kind of public diplomacy with your rival countries. The public diplomacy can also be with the countries with which you share good relations. For example, we share cordial relations with the other neighbors of Pakistan, like China, Iran. Then we have good relations with broader countries at large, like Turkey, Azerbaijan, etc., and more. So we can have our cultural and educational exchanges with those countries as well. Other than that, credible dissemination of information is also available through media. So media is also used here in order to further the role of public diplomacy. As you can see that you would find nowadays on media, multiple television series of other countries being showed so that you can promote their culture in your country so that the people would know more about the other countries. For example, nowadays in Pakistan, you would see more Turkish television series being aired. And similarly, some of our serials, dramas are being aired in Turkey, Azerbaijan, and even some other countries, even in India. So these are basically some other tools which basically contribute greatly to the public diplomacy over here, because that is being, you can say, culminated, or you can say a passage has been created through the media. Then it is basically, you can say the main objective behind is to achieve a national objective without resorting to force. So basically, public diplomacy is a softer image to achieve national objectives without using the military over here. And then furthermore, you can also enhance the economic prosperity inside the country. Moving on, branding or cultural communication. So basically, you would also see, for instance, I'm quoting continuously Pakistan, since I'm Pakistani, so it's much more convenient for me. But in other countries as well, you would see that branding or cultural communication is quite common. You would see brands of other countries being promoted in your country, and their brand and their actors are being used as brand ambassadors in your country on as the face of the products being produced in your country. They're your brand ambassadors. For example, you'll see Gucci and Gabbana. There's these foreign brands been, you can say, used as advertisement in your country. Then nowadays, they're also using brand ambassadors. For example, some of the artists from other countries are being used as the face of the brands producing clothes in Pakistan. So this is basically also a tool of, you can say, public diplomacy, that is basically branding or cultural communication. So branding creates a general goodwill and facilitates cooperation across a variety of issues. So branding is again a way through which you can bring people closer, and it helps to maintain long-term alliance and relationships, as well as undermine enemies' propaganda. So basically, this is another way through which you can curb the propaganda which is being propagated by the enemy. Well, during the Cold War, United States used public diplomacy to persuade European audiences. At the same time, the United States State Department built reading rooms in allied countries with books about American history and culture. So basically, since during the Cold War, the European countries were basically in shackles. They were destructed due to the blow they faced at the end of the World War II. So now the countries were basically trying to build themselves back up. But there was a tug of war between the capitalist class and the communist class. So basically, Russia was trying to pursue its expansionist policies, and United States was basically trying to pursue its, you can say, it was trying to cut down the expansionist policies of Russia. So in this tug of war, basically, the softer power, the softer way to persuade these European countries from falling in the hands of communism, what United States did was basically sending out aid in the form, like not only in the form of money, but in the form of clothes and in the form of some sort of scholarship, etc., and also providing them with books which would be representing the history and culture of United States of America. Moving on. Political advocacy. Political advocacy is a second type of public diplomacy in which various strategies are designed to facilitate rapid results to build foreign support for immediate policy objectives. Political advocacy, for example, is, again, this is basically a tool used directly by the political setup. For example, if a problem has risen and now there is no other way around, so what happens is that the political actors basically would directly reach out to the, you can say, actors who are quite actively working in order to facilitate rapid results so that they can build some sort of foreign support for immediate policy objectives. For example, can you please turn off your microphone?
आदत नहीं पई खड़ी होंदी
Kamar Khan, can you please turn off your microphone? Anyhow, so basically, for example, if there is a flood or you need some sort of support, so you would, or there is an earthquake and there has been destruction and we need some sort of help from the other countries. So we would activate those philanthropists working in our country. For example, Eidi, Abdul Sattar Eidi is one of the faces of Pakistan, who has been actively working not only in Pakistan, but across the border as well in times of desperate need, in times of desperate requirements. So we can actively engage such kind of actors in order to pursue the objective or for the purpose of rapid results. This type of political advocacy is illustrated by efforts of Kuwait, for example, in 1990 to gain US popular support for an attack against Iraq. So here, back in 1990, Kuwait also pursued this kind of political advocacy, where they tried to attract the interest of the United States in order to gain their, you can say, support while they were trying to fight off Iraq. Then this strategy basically has two goals. It basically encourages cooperation by pressurizing foreign leaders. Then it encourages foreign audience to revolt against their leaders. Again, another thing about this political advocacy is that sometimes in order to pursue your national goals, your national interests, you basically engage the audience of the other country. For example, Pakistan's government presented a dossier in United Nations regarding the fact that India has been funding the extremist Baloch fragments of Balochistan province in order to turn them against the government of Pakistan. So basically, this is one of the ways in which the leaders of the country, of other country, would encourage or facilitate the foreign audience to revolt against their own leaders or their own country. Then there are some other challenges to public diplomacy. For example, these challenges are the rise of the alternative approaches. For example, there is this rise of these non-state actors, for example, the terrorists, who basically would try to, you can say, create a hurdle in the pursuance or the on the way of furthering the agenda of public diplomacy. They would stand in the way by basically probably conducting some terrorist activities, by killing or by bomb blasts or by kidnapping, and actually by creating an environment of terror in which they would be this, they would create some sort of a barrier which would prevent the public diplomacy from properly carrying on. Then there are some sort of political differences, because obviously every country has multiple political parties and they do not agree with each other, because that is obviously their, you can say, mandate, that they have to somehow criticize the sitting government, or maybe the other way around. So what happens is that sometimes if the sitting government is trying to pursue some sort of public diplomacy, there is a possibility that the opposition is not in favor of those agenda that the sitting government is trying to pursue, and they might stand in the way of that. So that is again another challenge to public diplomacy. Then there is this information warfare, because you get information, since there is information coming from all directions. So there are also the factors available where there is this issue of conspiracy theories, and these conspiracy theories actually create this environment where there's this information warfare. So basically you float an idea today, a good one, there is a possibility that 4 people, 5 people would come across you and they would try to just push you down, pin you down, just to tell you that no, you're wrong, this is right. Because since we have a lot of school of thoughts, we have realist perspectives, we have liberal perspectives, we have constructivist perspectives, and many others. So basically there is this information warfare. So that again is a challenge to public diplomacy. Moving on, there is this innovation of new technologies, for example, social networks, which now imposes greater control over the political advertisements on their platforms. Then there is media as a propaganda for some powerful countries. Well, the problem of perception, for example, in case of US-Russian relations, according to Russia, America is facing national identity crisis. Failure in presidential elections and demonizing Russia is a tool for liberals to achieve political goals. So this is one such example that how media can be used as a propagating tool so that they can basically, you can say, belittle another country. Moving on, for this reason, public diplomats actively work to avoid perception that they are not part of a propaganda. Just make sure that when we talk about diplomacy, although diplomacy is basically, as Wilson says, that, Churchill says that it is basically an art of telling your opponent to go to hell in such a manner that the gentleman looks forward to the journey. But again, there is always a propaganda attached to it, because diplomacy means furthering the interest of your country. So it does not necessarily mean that the interest of the country is always good or is always right for the other country. So there is a possibility that on one side where there is this cultural and there is this educational, you can say, understandings developed between 2 countries, there is a possibility you're trying to propagate through the public in order to you can say belittle or you can say push down another country from top to bottom. Before World War II, the Great Britain waged a quite effective campaign to rally American popular support for its cause. Many Americans felt that Britain had exaggerated the German threat in World War I and needlessly drawn the United States into the conflict. So these are another means. For example, there were these movies which were being, you can say, showed in the cinemas during the World War I, which basically showed the Germans as those, you can say, demons which were basically going to take over the world. And there is a possibility that they were not that much of a demon. There is a possibility they created a demon because they were over exaggerating what basically German threat was originally, maybe. So hence, British diplomats cultivated their message and built relationships with members of the United States press corps who had more credibility with the American audience. They also restricted direct broadcasts to the United States. Moving on, there is just a short model of an analysis about the public diplomacy. For example, public diplomats, what kind of, you can say, outreach they have. They are through the governments. There can be through the sitting government or the opposition. Then there is these immediate strategic publics, for example, which is a targeted public, which is out there just for the sake, which are actually the public diplomats, as they are always working for the objectives and the interests of a country. And then there's this mass public, which is both domestic and foreign. The domestic public, for example, is trying to send out message to other countries through the use of social media or through giving interviews to various media channels, etc. And then there is this foreign mass public, which is basically trying to put out a good word of your country from overseas. So basically, this analytical model of public diplomacy explains the idea of a public diplomat. Let's come to the conclusions and recommendations. Diplomacy is changing from club to network diplomacy. So basically, initially, diplomacy was just confined to diplomats or envoys, which would go from your country to another, and similarly, their diplomats coming from their country, from the host country to the receiving country. So this process, basically, you can say scenario has evolved. And now instead of a club, it is a network of diplomacy. So previously it was just one-to-one conversation probably, or just on the governmental level. Now it is a network of diplomacy, which includes various individuals, NGOs, intergovernmental organizations, and multinational corporations. And then there's these media channels, and then there's this public, which is trying to spread the message of peace and intercultural harmony through various social media channels. And then the public diplomacy has to integrate with other diplomacies to provide coordination. Since there is this backdoor diplomacy and there's these other kinds of diplomacies which are out there. So basically they all have to be integrated in order to provide a coordinated kind of a message. The message shouldn't be scattered. It should be, you can say, a well-formed kind of a message, which should present the interest of the country. A growing importance of the cooperation between diplomats and media, as well as other organizations and educational institutes, obviously is another good recommendation which we can place in the public diplomacy flow. In the future, you should say that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the future should be partner-oriented, state, non-state cooperation, domestically engaged, flexible and resilient, as well as technology-enabled. So this would basically make the platform of public diplomacy much more, you can say, stronger and much more viable for the, you can say, the audience and the countries at large. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'm here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rida, for your fruitful and informative talk. And you explained everything about public diplomacy, pros and cons, challenges. So it was very informative presentation, and it was a very good session. So now I would like to invite Ms. Leah Komba. She wanted to ask a question. Yes, Ms. Leah, you can ask.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
My name is Leah Komba. I'm from Angola. And Ms. Rida, thank you for your presentation. It was amazing. And I have a doubt. There's something in your graphic that I didn't understand. I don't know if you can get back to your graphics.
Yes, Ms. Over, please.
If you can share it again.
Which one? Could you please?
Okay. So let me explain. I don't know if you will understand. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, here you explained the division and you said that mass publics, this part where you talk about mass publics and you divided it in domestic and foreign. I didn't understand the domestic part. What is it?
Basically, domestic public is the public which is general public, all right, which does not have any you can say direct link with the government, which is basically trying to pursue the interest of the country on their own. For example, I'm not me actually, I might be somehow related to government because I'm working for a government institute right now, but the people of which are basically working on the street, if you ever try to talk to them and they would try to send a good message through media, for example, if the media channels go across to them and ask them questions about the other countries, and they would send a softer version that we love this country, this is our brother country, this is our sister country, or whatever, this would send a good message. So basically this kind of you can say messages given by the mass public, which is not basically a strategic public, which is just general public, that also serves as the, you can say, as a pub in the sense of public diplomacy. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it actually does. I have another question and I won't give a lot of your time. Yeah. The question is the following. What's the relationship between public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I want to know if you can tell me what is the relationship between public diplomacy and cultural diplomacy.
Basically, public diplomacy focuses on, you can say, unilateral conversations, and primarily it is addressed to the masses, okay? So public diplomacy, for example, you can say cultural diplomacy falls under the, you can say, broader term of public diplomacy, while cultural diplomacy falls under the broader title or heading of the public diplomacy. However, if we talk particularly about the cultural diplomacy, it is solely about the cultural exchanges. You basically have various events which basically various states organize with each other, where they send the, you can say, have events in their own country where they could invite guests from the other country for the purpose of some sort of, maybe, it does not necessarily have to be their own country's dresses. There can be some sort of models. They would bring their culture to Pakistan, and we can send the culture of Pakistan to other countries where they can present our own culture, which is like shalwar kameez and sherwani and the other dresses we wear. Then apart from that, all the food, the dishes we make, that is also part of our culture. And then the hospitality that we have in our country, we will take the gifts over there, we will present, there's this ajrak, this you can say this a mantle that has been presented in the Sindh, province of Sindh in Pakistan, which is also a sign of, you can say, hospitality and our culture. So we can have these kinds of events. That is basically defined as only cultural diplomacy, while public diplomacy is a very broad term. So under the category of public diplomacy, cultural diplomacy also falls over there. But cultural diplomacy is just only confined to culture. Nothing else falls over here. In public diplomacy, there can be some sort of hardcore activities as well, but culture is just a soft kind of an image of diplomacy. I hope I answered your question. Yes, Mr. Osvaldo, you want to ask something?
Okay, I'm sorry. I have another question.
Yes.
Since from what I can see from your graph, you told us that analytical model of public diplomacy is divided into three pillars, which is government, intermediate strategies publics, and mass public. Well, since the first pillar of analytical model of public diplomacy is the government, and I'm just analytical in government sector, I would like to know, when you mean government 1 and government 2, what exactly trying to tell us as the structure of government starts with three pillars, which is the national government, provincial government, and local government. So once again, as you state that is government 1 and government 2, what exactly trying to tell us? Is it directed to national government, provincial government, or just local government? Or you're just trying to tell us that it's just government 1 as example of part of the public as divided to 1, And again, as the second example, as government two, as part of a government divided into two. What exactly trying to tell us from that part?
All right. So basically, I should have been a little more clear over there, but I just, in rush, just forgot to mention over there. Well, I tried to, you can say, when I'm talking about government one, I was trying to tell that the central government, the sitting government center, basically the kind of diplomacy they are conducting, which is one-to-one diplomacy, which is through their various, you can say, channels, which is the public or the media, and through the philanthropists and the other actors which are engaging over there. And then by the government too, I was trying to talk about the opposition. See, sometimes what happens is that some actors who are not ready to talk with the sitting government, they are ready to talk with the opposition. All right. So I was trying to talk about the government too as the oppositions in Pakistan, because recently what happened in Pakistan was that the National Security Advisor of Afghanistan, the sitting government was not ready to engage with him because he just blurted out some sort of very harsh kind of language for Pakistan. But in this case, the opposition government was basically not in Pakistan and they were sitting abroad, and they at least heard what he was trying to say. So basically over here, I'm trying to say that when the sitting government is not available for the sake of the interest of the state, you can always use the opposition. See, so that is what I'm trying to, I should have been more clear in the graph. I apologize for that.
Okay, no problem. So just one thing else. So when you're trying to tell us that opposition, you're trying to tell us that the main government in a country is the main political party in a country is the main government. This is what I'm trying to say. When you mean the main government, you're trying to tell us the main political country who took the government from the election, right? Who's the political party who's running the country. And when you're talking about the opposition, you're talking about another or other political party who still look at the government and fighting against changes and bring, some sort of just understanding about what exactly or how the government is leading the country. For an example, in our country, we have 6 political countries, and I work as in one of them. So sometimes when our main government, which is the government, which is the political party who's running the country, sometimes they take some actions in order to just maintain or create political or public policies in order to, create a sense of comfortability for the population who lives in the country. Sometimes the opposition go against them. Like, we don't agree that this is the best way to lead the country and things like that. So what I was trying to understand from your explanation is that government one is exactly you trying to tell us that those issues
government.
The elected government. And government two is
it's basically the one which was not elected, all the other ones, all the other parties.
The opposition
so basically in our country, we also have multiple party system. So we have been having those parties in rotation, you can see. So basically, if you just study the history of Pakistan, 3 parties have been actually in rotation. They have been coming in power, going out of power. Then we had some military, we had some dictatorship in our country as well. So basically 3 political parties have always been in tussle. Nowadays, we are having this party called Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which is basically the elected government right now. Exactly. And the opposition is basically the parties which were not elected, and now they're in coalition with each other. All right, they're in coalition. Okay. So this is basically People's Party of Pakistan. The
ones that work together in parliament and everything.
Actually, sometimes they do, but sometimes when there is some sort of an issue which there is some sort of strife even in the opposition as well. But on most cases, the opposition stand together whenever there is some sort of an issue with the elected government.
Okay, exactly. It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Osvaldo.
Now,
yes,
I think
Shifa.
Okay.
Ms. Shifa would like to ask a question.
Yes. Hello, Ms. Rida. I have a question that what is the key difference between government public diplomacy and non-state public diplomacy?
Well, the governmental diplomacy is basically, you can say, a more legitimate form of a diplomacy over here, because what happens is that when we talk about governmental diplomacy, we know that all the factors that we are trying to pursue in this kind of diplomacy are directly serving the interest of the country. But when we talk about the non-state actors, which does not necessarily mean only the terrorists, there are other non-state actors as well. There is a possibility that even if they're trying to pursue some sort of good, it might not be in the interest of the state. Okay, sometimes what happens is that they might be trying to pursue, for example, LGBT rights. Okay, that is all right in many states in the world, but unfortunately or fortunately, however you see it, it is not okay in Muslim states. Okay, so and then again, it is against the interest of the state, because we were founded on the principles of Islam, and then those fanatic factions would just rise up, and there's going to be a lot of strife, and there are going to be riots in the country. So the government has to stop those non-state actors for pursuing such kinds of objectives. All right, so basically that is where the difference comes. So basically the public diplomacy needs to be, you can say, filtered before it goes on air. Sometimes some problems occur because we cannot control people nowadays, since there is this open flow of information due to the factor that there is social media, and people are basically open to whatever argument they're saying, but they're still trying to make sure that whatever they are saying is not actually some sort of, you can say, a treason or a treachery, any such kind of an act. So basically that is much, in my opinion, the main difference between states diplomacy and a non-state actors diplomacy.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Rida, we will take the last question from Leah Pomba. The last question.
Yeah.
Ms.
Oh.
Leah.
Actually, when Rida was explaining the graphics and Mr. Rivaldo Adult came out, you said that government, first one is the political party elected, and the second one is the opposition parties. So when you talk about governments and the division of public diplomacy, you are talking about a more inside of the state diplomacy, not something related to also foreign countries. For example, when you talk about two governments, for example, in Pakistan, you are only talking about the party elected in Pakistan and the opposition in Pakistan, nothing related to other countries outside Pakistan.
Actually, it's the same in India as well. It happens in India as well. It also happens in Iran, all right? And it happens in some other Middle Eastern countries as well. When you can say, I was basically trying to explain the model of Pakistan, but there are other countries who are actually following the same kind of model. Obviously, this is not the ultimate model. This was just one example of a model. There are other models out there as well, which can better explain. So I was basically trying to give an example of my country, but you're right. When we talk about public diplomacy, we can just remove the second government part, and that would be actually much more, you can say, easier to understand, because the main government or the elected government is everywhere, or the whatever the sitting government. So we can remove the second government part. The second government part was basically for those countries which have basically opposition parties which were not elected. But if other countries which does not have this kind of an issue, they can always remove the second fragment. So that's like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Rida, for answering all the questions and for your fruitful presentation. I would like to thank all the participants, and especially to you for joining us today in our session and discussing everything and explained in a very detail. So we are ending up our session here today, and we'll see you in our upcoming session. So good luck, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.